Hello there. Welcome to a very new episode of Branding with Friends, the show where branding meets key small business topics. Here you're going to learn tips straight from the experts on everything from PR to social media to marketing. We're going to focus on what you can do right now to use these topics plus the power of branding to attract your ideal clients. I'm your host, branding expert Annie Franceschi with Greatest Story Creative. I help small business owners tell their story and show their value through branding. I'm also a former Disney storyteller, professional speaker, and the author of the best-selling book, Permission to Try. And today, I'm going to introduce you to one of my dear friends in the business world. If you have ever wondered how to write a book, where to get started, how do you work with an editor, how do you publish your first book as a small business owner, you are going to love today's episode. And my guest, the amazing Jodi Brandon. Jodi has more than 20 years experience in book publishing. After many years working in traditional publishing, she began serving the self-publishing community as both an editor and a book coach. Jodi's passion these days is working as a book publishing partner for creative entrepreneurs and small business owners who want to serve their business with a book. I also happen to think she's pretty wonderful because she was the incredible editor on my book, Permission to Try. So, Jodi, welcome to Branding with Friends.
I am so excited to be here, Annie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I am so glad you're here. I've been wanting to do this for a while because, as I just referenced, I work with Jodi to do both a developmental edit and a professional copy edit and proofread on my first book. Had an incredible experience, and I want you guys to understand, if you're thinking of writing a book, what are some things you need to know? So Jodi is the perfect person to talk about to have us come talk about book editing and publishing. Jodi's going to share 3 tips with you about what you can do to get started. And so, as we always do with Branding with Annie, we're going to share those first 2 tips as we're going in our conversation today, but make sure you listen to the very, very end because we're going to save that 3rd tip for the end of the episode, so you don't want to miss it. So as we gear up for that sort of first tip, Jodi, we know your biography now, but just tell us a little bit about how you fell into this world of publishing and editing.
Well, I'm one of those really weird and lucky people who knew from a very young age what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what it would exactly look like, but I mean, even from the time I was 4 years old and could read and write, I knew that I wanted to work with books and words, and I was constantly writing stories and then correcting them and, all of those kinds of things. And then I graduated from college. I studied business and English in college. Graduated and 13 days later moved to New York City because I knew that's where the publishing world lives.
Right.
So I made a deal with my parents that I would, work my tail off to get a job. And if I could get a job, I could stay in New York. And if I didn't, I couldn't. I had to move home. And I did not want to move home.
Yep.
So I worked my tail off and got a job, an entry-level job in publishing, which is how everybody starts out. And I just kind of worked my way up. And then after like a few years, I was at a different publishing house, and then I met my now husband, and he was transferred to his company's Philadelphia office.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of publishing outside of scientific publishing in Philadelphia, even today. And that was definitely not my thing.
Yeah.
So that's how I started, sort of freelancing on the side. And then I was working for publishers still, but then a couple of people that I worked with reached out to me and said, "Hey, do you work with people directly? I'm working on a second book and I need some help with it." And I was like, "Yes, I can totally do that." And then I realized, how much better being an entrepreneur is than, the 9-to-5 grind when somebody else is dictating your hours, your schedule, your pay, all of those things.
Yes, we're both reformed corporate America survivors, right?
Yes.
When you were publishing and me with Disney, it's like great experience, but so glad we're not doing it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, publishing is known for being a lousy salary industry, unless you're like on the business side of the industry versus the editorial production side, which is where I was.
Right.
And so the first time a client said to me, "Okay, and what do you charge per hour?" I was like, "Oh man, this is it."
Yes, I have no good answer for this.
Yeah.
But then
I figured it out and realized I could make way more money this way. And so, and choose the projects I wanted to work on versus something being assigned to me. And so it was just, a lot of hustle at the beginning, and now here we are years later.
That's a theme, and that's something we're seeing in all these Branding with Friends episodes is everybody has some version of a story where it's like, we have no idea what we're doing when we're getting started, and to some degree, we still have no idea what we're doing but we're more polished and
Right.
confident about it.
Exactly.
Right. And many of us are corporate, America survivors in that way, but so grateful for our experience. So I also love that we're having you on today because not only do you work with author entrepreneurs, you are one, right? So you have a small business. So you really understand both sides of it, and you're an author. So tell us briefly about your books. I know you just came out with a second edition of it.
I did. I just revised the book that basically is, I mean, it's sort of what I teach my clients and walk them through, the write, publish, market, methodology. And I figured as I started to work with more and more self-publishing author entrepreneurs, I better, put my money where my mouth is. If I'm going to tell them how to self-publish a book on Amazon, I better have done it.
Yes.
So that's how the book originally came to be. And then there's been a lot of changes with Amazon the last couple of years that necessitated. I mean, there are things in the book that were wrong based on those changes. So I was like, well, it's time for an update. So I just revised and put out the new edition this fall. So yeah, it's exciting.
And it's called Write, Publish, Market.
Write, Publish, Market
by Jodi Brandon.
Yes.
Get this book. I read this book by the pool. I tabbed through it. It's just the right length. It's like a quick start guide. And now it's up to date thanks to Jodi. But it was great even when I dog-eared the heck out of it. So I'm sure we've gotten people very excited to, not only because you're an author and an entrepreneur, you really coach people on this. So with this being your key expertise, for those of us who are listening to this and thinking, I'm going to write that book, how do I get started? What do I need to know from your perspective? What is the first tip, the first lesson you would give them?
The first thing I think is to clearly identify your goals. Why are you writing a book? I mean, as business owners, we have a lot of choices. It could be we could do a course, we could start a podcast. We could, do a challenge. We could just teach a masterclass. We could do any of these things. So why is it a book? That's, I think, the first thing to be clear on. And then what do you want that book to do for you and your business? Because if you think it's going to make you $1 million,
it made me $1 million on day one, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Most of my clients, money is not the primary goal. You can certainly get some momentum and build up a nice little passive income stream. But for most author entrepreneurs is what I call, small business owners writing a book. The goal is different. It's usually increased visibility, credibility, authority, use it as a funnel to get people into you, into your system for greater leads, one-on-one services, things like that. You have to be clear about what that is, because otherwise, if you're not clear about that, all of the work you're putting into writing and editing and publishing and all of that, it's not going to meet that goal. And then, that's no good.
Right. Right. And I think people realize, do you know the current statistic of how many people who say that they're going to write a book versus who actually does? Do you know the current stat?
I don't know the difference. No, I
just was as high as like only 1%. I've heard 20%, and having done it, I'm sure because you've done it as well. To your point, like that's a great place to start, having your goals in mind, because you're going to need the momentum of why am I doing this?
Yeah. Well, it's a long-term project. It's not something you can do well in, a month or 2 months or whatever. I was just referencing not long ago when I was making the book trailer for my book release, the statistic about how 80% of Americans want to write a book, that old New York Times study. And what I want to know is what percent of entrepreneurs want to write a book, because I would bet it's higher than 80%. Obviously no way for me to know. But,
right. Yeah.
But I'm curious about that. So
do you have any advice to people on are there any good practices you have for goal setting, like specifically for your book, or exercises that you would recommend going through to identify goals for this?
I don't know that it's necessarily like a specific exercise, maybe more of a brainstorm kind of thing, just to see, a lot of it has to do with your business and who you are and where you want your business to go long term. Because if you want a lot of my clients want to or have a speaking arm of their business. Yeah. And a book is a great tool for that. So maybe that's something you identify as something that you want 3 years down the road, you want to be speaking, or 5 years down the road, you want to be, like a conference keynote or something like that. So it's really about thinking about the whole big picture, I think.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how a book kind of fits into that and dovetails with those, credibility and visibility are the two biggest things that I hear from every single person that reaches out to me,
Yeah.
wanting to know, like, should I write a book? Is it the right time? I mean, those are the two main driving forces. So I think you have to figure out, what do you want to be visible for? What do you want to be credibly known for?
Yeah.
And is that where you are now, or do you have things to do to get there? And then how does a book, sort of support those, those goals?
And I think that's the $64 million question. Here we are on Branding with Friends, branding being the operative word. And branding is just another way of saying, what do you want to be known for? Right. What are you actively working to be known for? In a book, in many ways, especially when you're an author entrepreneur, or you're an entrepreneur who's writing a book, if at a bare minimum, you are picking what you want to be known for.
Right.
Right. And so that is so tied into what you would do from branding, whether it's a logo, a color, the words you use to talk about your business extends into maybe the book that you would write if you intend for that book to be in any way related to the business.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you could write the best book out there, but if nobody knows it exists or doesn't have anything to do with your business, people aren't going to marry the two.
And that's also about the power of setting those goals so that it's something worth setting your time aside for, guys. So If you're running a business, you probably don't have a lot of time. And so you have to have those goals top of mind. I put them on a big sheet, Post-it board, and I put it up there. It also helped me sort of have a true north. So I remember writing things like, my book was not a book to grow the business. Permission to Try is a self-help book. I'm going to write the business branding book next. But I wanted to start with my story. And so I did a self-help book. And so my goals were really different. Even though it relates to my business and relates to my speaking career, my goals were, I wanted to help people. And I want the book to exist because I've always wanted to write a book. Mm-hmm. And so I set my expectations really low, and it was great because by the time I'd done beta readers or just had people read the book early, essentially, I'd already met my goals. Right. So I was under way less pressure to make X number of money or become a bestseller. Those things did happen, but they weren't why I was doing it. And so not losing sight of why. I think you've just tipped on to if it's not relevant, why are you doing it? And I think that perfectly leads into your second tip. So tell us, if we already have identified our goals, what is the next thing we need to identify?
Audience. You've got to figure out who. I mean, it sounds so cliche to say that it's like who, what, why, where, when, how. Like second grade English, but it really, at its core basic level, those are the questions you need to answer. And audience is the next big one, because just like you can write a great book and nobody can find it. If you write a great book, but nobody wants it, you've also wasted your time. So you've got to figure out who's the most likely audience to want this book and to purchase this book. Mm-hmm. And I can't tell you exactly who that is for you, but I can tell you it's not everyone.
Right.
It's just like when
but everyone can. I have something to say to everyone. Anyone can be touched by this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know.
Your book does have serve a broader audience, though.
But even that, I have to pick an audience. For it to be effective. If you're trying to talk to everybody, nobody can hear you.
Exactly. And especially with a book to serve your business, I think that's an even more niche thing. And you've got to figure out who exactly that is. And you've got to figure out, what do they want? What do they want from you? What do they need from you?
Yeah.
And that, and it ties right back into your credibility, because if you're going to write a book about something that has nothing to do with your business, and then you want to go speak about it, those two things are not coming together. Those conference organizers, those summit organizers, those people are not thinking of you as the go-to person for that topic.
Yeah.
Because you're not giving people what they're asking for. So you've got to figure out, who that is. And that's not to say that it's only, that you have to narrow it down to the point of, well, it's, women between the ages of 26 and 27 and a half who've been in business for 2.5. It doesn't have to be that
freckles specific on their right cheek. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there are secondary audiences too, which a lot of people, forget sometimes. So, maybe your primary audience is, female business owners who've been in business, 10 or more years.
Right.
But then a secondary audience could be, female business owners who've been in business 5 to 10 years, who might be, trying to make that, that next step forward, or, people who want to start a business. It might be a little bit higher than what they need right now, but it could be good foundational information. So that's a secondary audience, though. You don't want to write to that person. You want to write to this person. And if this person could get something out of it, great. So that's, I mean, that like appeases a lot of people when they're like, I don't want to narrow it too far.
Well, and that's so common. That's something, again, when we see it in branding, that I've started to say we have to look at your primary ideal client, as in you have to pick PIC.
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to talk to everybody, no one can hear you, right? So focusing back in, and the thought being, just like with a book, your book is going to find its way into someone's hands that really needs it. It's not the question of who does it add value to. It's who do you add the most value to?
Yes.
And the
Absolutely.
same is true with your business.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've done the branding work in your business to know who your primary ideal clients are, and then you have this goal of writing a book, which is supposed to grow that business, guess who should be the ideal reader for that book? It should be your ideal client.
It amazes me, honestly, still today, after all of these years, how many of my clients are shocked when they're like, oh, I've done an exercise like this before for my business. I hope so.
Yeah. And it would prepare you. So if you were going to work with somebody like Jodi, who would come in and help you either, do a developmental edit or come in and do the editing of your manuscript from a professional standpoint, you will be more prepared if you are going back to what does your business stand for? And have you done that foundational work of what your goals of your business are, who the audience is for your business, what you really do. That is going to help take some of the guesswork out of this. You actually have more. What I run into all the time with business owners is that they have done more work than they realize. You don't give yourself credit. Like you said, they're like, oh, I've done this before. I've done this experience before. And it's going to make this writing a book so much more valuable.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, yes, and the thing I would say about businesses too, is I see that same reluctance. Oh, I don't want to niche down. I don't want to do this. But remember, you're always still the captain of the ship when it comes to your book. And when it comes especially to your business, because there are people who come across my desk all the time. They don't fit my process. They don't fit necessarily the primary ideal client, but there's something about the project or the person. And I say, great. Yes, I'd love to do the project. Right. You get to decide what is most important to your business and just like most important to your book. But I think also you're highlighting something that down the road is coming. And you and I both know it because I do branding and marketing. You do marketing with books and you've done it for yourself, is that if you don't know the audience, who are you going to go market the book to?
Right.
Let alone write it with them in mind.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to be able to find those people. And this is not one of my tips. It's just kind of like a bonus pro tip.
Oh, bonus pro tip.
You work with on your manuscript should want to know those things. They should be asking you for those things, because you're not looking for somebody to just, like correct grammar and be a seventh grade English teacher. You're looking for somebody who can help make your book as good as it can be for the audience you want to serve.
Yes.
So anybody who's working on your book should want to know the answers to those questions. What are your goals? Who is your audience? All of those things.
And they should like your genre.
Moving in the same direction.
I really think they should like the kind of books you want to write.
Oh, for sure. That's super helpful. Yeah.
I get the question a lot, Jodi, from people who are asking me, how do you go about finding an editor? So what's your best advice for finding the right editor for you? I think that's sort of a continuation of what you just started talking about.
Honestly, word of mouth is great. And that's in the entrepreneurial world. We value that over just about anything. There are editing associations. Editing is tricky because there's no formal there's no formal degree or anything like that in the United States. So, anybody could call themselves an editor. And many people do who are not qualified. Yeah. So you have to, make sure there are trusted, organizations, though, the Editorial Freelancers Association, the American Copy Editors Society, like those kinds of groups. Yeah. You just want to vet somebody. But honestly, word of mouth is a great, especially if like if somebody came to you and you had a great experience, that's a great way to, to spread the word. And most entrepreneurs know other entrepreneurs who've written a book.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And so it was a good experience or it wasn't, but if it was, find out who's on their team. Yeah. Who did their marketing, who did their editing, who did their, their layout, their formatting, all of those things. Because I will say there are not a ton of publishing professionals who focus on working with author entrepreneurs. Right. The publishing community is huge, but a lot of them, don't niche down and work with self-publishing, author business owners or author entrepreneurs. So
So you want
But
to
they're
maybe
out
seek
there.
somebody like that out who's going to understand how different it is to write a book to grow your business versus
Yeah.
a book that's fiction or versus your memoir or even a self-help book. I came to you using my own experience because I knew I wanted to, one, you'd worked with a lot of people that I had seen and I know people had great experiences with you. So again, the word of mouth, I followed you on Instagram and that you were very consistent about what you were sharing. I bought your book and that was really helpful to me. But I felt like, yes, I know my first book's not really business focused. It's more about growing as a speaker, but I know I want to write more than one. So wouldn't it be great to have a relationship with an editor who I could work with on multiple titles
Yeah.
too,
Yeah.
to feel that long-term
Mm-hmm.
relationship?
And I mean, and it's somebody who isn't going to do a good job on your book and knows it should tell you. And I mean,
Yes.
everybody that I know in publishing would tell someone. I mean, it doesn't make sense for anybody, for an editor or any kind of professional to take on a project that they know they can't do the best job for that client.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it ends up just being, I mean, a disaster all around. So
I think that's just excellent advice for hiring, to your point. It's something I see a lot with branding. I am something that I look at it like I'm in this to be big picture, right? And so somebody who's not a good fit right now could be a good fit in 6 months to a year, could be a good fit with another business, or may just not be a great fit for my process for whatever reason. And I'm going to serve them better if I say, you know what, I don't think I'm the right partner. Here's who might be. And when I tell people that, I always hear, thank you for being candid. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for being
absolutely.
transparent. Yeah. And I've said no to people who've then sent me their cousin or their friend.
Right.
It's a great fit for what I do. And then they are, that person who came to me in the first place is in a more successful place because they work with the right partner, not because they work with me. And it takes a professional to do that. So I think that's great advice to be looking for, no matter who you're hiring, for branding, for editing, for marketing, for publishing.
Yeah.
Make sure it's somebody who really is going to tell you and also push back on you and not just say, yeah, whatever you want on the cover is fine.
Right.
That's somebody who's not giving you the value of their expertise.
Absolutely not. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I mean, yeah, because I mean, you're driving the bus as a self-publishing author entrepreneur, but you're hiring these people for a reason. You're hiring them for their expertise. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you have final say. But if you ask 3 different professionals, should I do this? And it's a no from all 3 of them and you do it, then don't be shocked when there's a problem down the line.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people who are just there to be executional partners, and it's important to see the difference. And one of the biggest things I did going into my book development was, I know you don't always do this for clients, but Jodi does developmental editing as well. And developmental editing, from my experience, was really looking at the overall structure of the book, the theme of the book. I told my story out of order in Permission to Try. It's sort of a motivational pep talk. So you can read essay by essay, pick up the book anywhere you want, and still get something out of it. So I was like, hey, Jodi, does this make any sense? And apparently that's called a developmental edit, which was so powerful. You just know that it doesn't have to be, you can work with somebody like Jodi as a book coach, as a developmental editor. So if you're not sure if maybe you want to try something, you have this idea outside the box, or if you're not sure what your idea is going to make sense and fit your goals and your audience, you can have somebody like Jodi do that review, right?
It's hard to do that for yourself when you're yours is even more so because it was your story. But a lot of times, even if it's not your story, if you've written a 50,000 word manuscript, you're so deep into it. It's so hard to pull yourself back out and say, oh my gosh, am I making, these are the points.
If I lost my mind.
Am I making them?
To anyone else? Yes.
I feel like I've made them, but have I? No, I mean, and I did those things for my book too.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to. Otherwise, I mean, maybe you'll get lucky and strike gold and it'll be as strong as it could be, but it probably will be stronger if you get that professional opinion.
And I think people too often dismiss editing as like, oh, well, that's just grammar. Mm-hmm. And that was not my experience at all. Having had you do the developmental edit, not only did you, yes, it makes sense. Here are some ways to tighten it. Here are some things that were unclear. Here are some ideas that I had. You were a partner throughout the process as I had questions. You did 2 passes with the grammar and those in the syntax and all of that, and a proofread. There's just a lot more to it. And I think talking to somebody like Jodi or another editor as you're going through this, it is really the value of having a professional that has that expertise and that perspective. Much like branding, you want to look for partners who are going to be able to give you feedback, be able to say, yes, this is where you might have wanted to go. Here's why I would go this way. Here's what we could do instead to make sure you're set up for success.
Yeah. Well, you don't know what you don't know.
Correct.
And your expertise is branding, not book publishing. My expertise is book publishing, not, so you have to, and I think as business owners, we're generally pretty good about that. Mm-hmm. We know, where our zone of genius is, and we're mostly pretty good, I find, about staying in our own lane.
Right.
You hire people to help you. You bring people onto your team, whether it's your branding team, your book team, whatever, who you trust and whose opinions you value. And so it makes it easier to listen to those people and trust that they have your project's best interest at heart.
Yes. And you absolutely did. I can't say enough good things. I know you've got one last tip to share with us today to bring it all together. But before we do that, I know you've got some fun things to share. How can our audience connect more with you after today's episode?
You can find me on social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook at Jodi Brandon Editorial. And I just this fall started a new podcast also called Write, Publish, Market. And you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's been a ton of fun. And in a couple of weeks, you'll be hearing Annie on there too. So.
Yes. So by the time you get this episode, I'm sure that's right. Will be live because it's 2020 at this point. So not to date everything for everybody, but that's the joy of podcasts and shows like this. Go back and binge it all. But Jodi's been talking about really great topics, interviewing lots of different people. I have an episode where I'm talking with her about my book, Permission to Try. So if you want to sort of hear it from Jodi's perspective, that's going to be a great episode to listen to. And there's so much more. So it's the Write, Market, Publish podcast.
Write, Publish, Market. Yep.
Right. Publish, market.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. So thank you so much. You've shared really two very powerful tips with us if we're thinking of writing a book. The first, of course, was to identify our goals, the why. The second was the who. So I am thrilled. What are we going to know? What's the third one that we need to be focused on?
Okay. The third is the what, your topic. Oh, so you've got to find that sweet spot. Like we were just talking before about your zone of genius, I call it. And that's probably the thing that, if you're in Facebook groups and people are asking questions about branding, they're tagging Annie. If they're asking questions about books, they might be tagging me. So it's the overall topic that you're asked about all the time. But then you've got to find the sweet spot because, if I'm going to write a book on, book publishing, self-publishing, it's going to be 1,000 pages long. If you're going to write a book on branding in general, it's going to be 1,000 pages long. And maybe that's what we want to write. Yeah. Maybe it is. Not many people are reading 1,000-page books these days. But so you've got to find that sweet spot. You've got to figure out what, subtopic, what piece of that topic do you want to write your book about? And I suggest starting, do brain dump. Do like a macro brain dump and then, kind of like zone in on a couple things and see what you have and then validate that topic with some people, ask 3, 4, 5 people that would be in your audience.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? Is this what you would be looking to find out? If you were going to read a book about branding, would you rather read about X or Y and kind of, validate as you go,
with your ideal client.
Get yourself so far into the process that again, and then you find out your audience doesn't want what you're looking for. So, it really is, all three of them tied together, the who, the why, and the what, goals, audience, topic. But yeah, you've got to find that sweet spot so so you're not writing for the next 17 years of your life, 1,000-page book.
And I think we've done a great job in this episode of trying to be time guardians for everyone. Mm-hmm. So if you listen to Jodi, she's trying to tell you how to not waste your time with writing a book. Writing a book takes so long, you guys. So it's worth it. It took me the better part of a year to do my book. But the whole point of this is to be really strategic and to not try to bite off more than you can chew. Yep. Right. And I love, Jodi, that you've just talked about, pick the topic, but it's not maybe the encyclopedia you're thinking. Because when you really start to think, well, if I wrote down everything I do in branding, it would be 1,000-page book, just like book editing, Write, Publish, Market, which is your, new second edition, is a great sort of, like I said, quick start guide. It's not everything. Yeah. It's sort of the top line stuff enough to know to work with you. And that's what I would add to this. And where I'm thinking I'm going with book 2 is I'm not going to share everything about branding, but it's going to be enough that you have a sense of why it's important, some ways to put it it into action. And then if you want to take the next step would be to talk with me or potentially work together in some way so I can help you get there. The other thought being too that, we didn't talk about this today, but if you have all these fun, fabulous ideas, just know that they can go into multiple books.
You're
So
right.
break
Absolutely.
a series, and then you do one on naming and one on
Yep.
taglines and this and
Mhm.
then that, and drill down. If you're
Right.
so good at it and you're going to knock them out, great. You can come back to the series.
Right.
But Jodi, thank you so much for joining us today. I think people learned a lot about how all these things go together in terms of, the why, the who, and ending on the what. So we would love to hear what your why, who, and what are going to be. So leave it for us, email us, connect with Jodi, of course, and don't forget to listen to her amazing Write, Publish, Market podcast that's running now, where anywhere your podcasts are listened to. We hope that you enjoyed yet another episode of Branding with Friends. So many thanks to my special guest, Jodi Brandon of Jodi Brandon Editorial, and of course, Write, Publish, Market, both the podcast and the book. I hope you'll tune in next time when we will tackle another topic that meets branding and business. But till then, I am Annie Franceschi of Greatest Story Creative. You can find all the Branding with Friends episodes, branding resources, and so much more at my website, greateststorycreative.com. Have a good one, guys.